It started as a simple camping trip. My friend Lisa and I planned a weekend getaway to escape the everyday stresses of work and life. We were both eager for a break and chose a remote spot deep in the woods, far from the noise and bustle of the city. It was supposed to be a relaxing escape, a chance to reconnect with nature and each other, to breathe in the fresh air and forget our worries. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, the late summer sun casting a warm golden glow through the trees. The campsite was perfect, nestled beside a clear, bubbling stream with a breathtaking view of the surrounding forest. We set up our tents, gathered firewood, and started preparing for the evening. The day had been long, and the tranquility of the forest felt like a much-needed balm for our souls. After a simple dinner of roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, we sat around the campfire, talking and laughing, sharing stories and memories. The sky darkened, and the stars began to twinkle above us, illuminating the night with a blanket of glittering lights. The forest was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves, and it felt peaceful, almost magical. It was as if the woods were wrapping us in a comforting embrace, shielding us from the worries of the outside world. As the night wore on, we decided to turn in. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves overhead. I crawled into my tent, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. But that feeling didn't last long. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of crying. It was faint at first, barely audible over the gentle murmur of the stream. I lay still, listening intently. The crying grew louder, more desperate. It sounded like a child lost and afraid. My heart raced as I unzipped my tent and stepped out into the cool night air. The moon cast an eerie glow over the campsite, illuminating the trees and casting long shadows across the ground. I saw Lisa emerging from her tent, her face pale and worried. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, my heart pounding. The crying was coming from deep in the woods. We grabbed our flashlights and followed the sound, calling out to the child. "Hello? Are you okay? Where are you?" The crying led us to a small clearing where it suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. We shone our flashlights around, but there was no sign of anyone, just the stillness of the forest, the trees standing like silent sentinels. We called out again, but there was no response. Just as we were about to turn back, we heard it again, this time from a different direction. The crying seemed to be moving, always just out of reach. We followed it, our fear growing with each step. After what felt like hours, we found ourselves near an old abandoned cabin. It was more of a ruin, really, with its roof caved in and ivy covering the walls. The crying was coming from inside. Lisa and I exchanged a nervous glance. "Should we go in?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I hesitated, but the thought of a lost child spurred me on. "We have to," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. We pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The air was cold and damp, filled with the smell of decay. Our flashlights revealed a small, dusty room with broken furniture and debris scattered everywhere. The crying had stopped again. We searched the cabin, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. There was no sign of a child, just the eerie silence. I was about to suggest we leave when Lisa gasped. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a corner of the room. I shone my flashlight in the direction she was pointing and saw a small, dusty doll lying on the floor. It was old, its clothes tattered and its face faded. There was something unsettling about it, something that made my skin crawl. As I reached down to pick it up, we heard the crying again, this time right behind us. We spun around, but there was no one there, just the darkness and the cold. "Let's get out of here," Lisa said, her voice shaking. I didn't need any convincing. We hurried out of the cabin and back to our campsite, the crying following us every step of the way. Back at the campsite, we stoked the fire and sat close to its warmth, trying to shake off the fear. The crying had stopped again, but the sense of unease lingered. We didn't sleep much that night, listening for any sign of the mysterious child. The shadows seemed to dance around us, and every rustle of the leaves made us jump. The next morning, we decided to pack up and leave. The peaceful retreat we had hoped for had turned into a nightmare. As we were packing, I found the doll from the cabin in my tent. I had no idea how it got there, but the sight of it sent chills down my spine. We hurried to leave the campsite and headed back to town. the doll left behind in the woods, but the crying haunted us even after we returned home. I couldn't shake the constant sensation of being watched during the night. Every time I woke up, the faint crying echoed around me, just beyond my reach. Lisa and I tried to rationalize what had happened, but the woods held no answers, only eerie stories of strange noises. The mystery of the crying child lingered, unsolved. I no longer camp. The fear of the woods, of being vulnerable again, is too overwhelming. The sound of that lost, desperate child remains etched in my memory, haunting me even now. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more spine-tingling tales, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. Don't forget to check out all our other videos for more thrilling and haunting stories.